A committee chair comes under siege. A former board member is awarded a $100 gift certificate despite blowback. A community member fights to attend a legal committee meeting. And the new incoming president restricts all discussion on important matters to board members only. This is the MXB Wire. This is your monthly update for September 2019. So, the board meeting on September 21st, 2019, it was one for the ages. It was by far the most entertaining board meeting I've been to. It was worth the drive from Washington, D.C. in that day. This one had everything. It had spite. It had rage. It had board members at each other's throats. It had board members trying to escape accountability. It had power plays and power moves. In any event, the meeting came to order at 9:45, and the president, Margie Sire, had an agenda prepared. She first went through committee reports, and these committee reports were uneventful. In fact, they were quite mundane. Tristan Kruger, who was not in attendance, called in to give his report on beautification. He by far got the most laughs that day. Margie asked Kruger if he had anything to report, and Kruger said, "Not much," and that brought the room down. Ellen on legal did have some things on the agenda. However, she saved her report for executive session. Beach Patrol, David Taylor was not even there, so there was no report on Beach Patrol. Jeff Sellas did report on some community facilities work. There was really not much there. But things got interesting when we got to the second half of the meeting, when we hit new business. And in new business, Margie presented her committee chair recommendations to the board for approval. The recommendations were as follows. I have them here on the agenda. For building, Sire recommended Jeff Sella. That's a hold for him. Jeff has been doing that job since David Weeking relinquished that job a few years back. On budget and finance, Sire recommended Steve Larson. Steve has been doing that job for about a year now. On community patrol, Sire recommended Michael Mara. He's a new board member. On commercial, Sire recommended Marty Schechter. That would be his first chair position, committee chair position. He's taking over from Judy Bennett, who failed to retain her seat in the last election. On community facilities, Sire recommended Alex Sella. Alex is, again, a new board member. On legal, Sire recommended Ellen Throop. Ellen's had that position for, I believe, the last 10 years. So that was a hold for Ellen. On beautification, Sire recommended Tris Kruger. There was no surprise there. Tris Kruger's been chair of the beautification committee for several years now. And on Beach Patrol, Sire recommended David Taylor. Now, David Taylor has the most tenure of everyone mentioned thus far. I believe David Taylor's been chair of the Beach Patrol Committee for the past 15 years, but I could be wrong. But I think it's about the past 15 years. On social, Sire recommended Mary Bird. That was a hold. Mary Bird's been doing that job for approximately the last 3 or 4 years. And on the nominating committee, Sire recommended Jeff Sella, the outgoing past president. Now, immediately after reading those recommendations, Tristan Kruger moved to bring a vote to accept Margie Sire's recommendations for committee chair positions. And this is where it got really interesting. Steve Larson jumped in right away and proposed that the Homeowners Association limit committee chair positions to elected board members. Larson proposed that board members be given the right of first refusal on all committee chair positions, and only on the event that no board member volunteered for a chair position on a committee should the chair position go to a non-board member. Larson cited as reasons, he cited that this would tie the inner workings of the committee back to the board and thus enhance the flow of communication between the committee and the board. Marty Schechter then weighed in and said that in the case of committees not chaired by board members, he claimed there was a lack of communication between the committee and the board, but Schechter did not give any examples as to which committees were derelict in these duties of miscommunication. Schechter further argued that as a result, the board was not privy to the decisions made by the committees not chaired by board members. Ellen, who chairs the legal committee, weighed in. She said limiting the chair positions to only board members was not appropriate and not necessary. Throop argued that the purpose of having ordinary members in the Homeowners Association serve as committee chairs was to alleviate board members from the burden of doing the work. It makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of committees and there's only 8-9 board members. Nancy Glasgow, though, who sits on the Beach Patrol Committee, singled out David Taylor, citing Taylor as being a one-man show, quote unquote. Glasgow argued that Taylor fails to organize regular Beach Patrol Committee meetings, something I wouldn't know. Glasgow further criticized Taylor for his poor attendance at board meetings. And I can attest to the fact that there are meetings where on the agenda, the Beach Patrol is mentioned. And David, in many of these cases when the Beach Patrol report is mentioned, David is not in attendance. Tristan Kruger, though, said that each committee needs a board member. However, a board member does not necessarily need to chair each committee. Kruger further argued that David Taylor has done a spectacular job as committee chair of the Beach Patrol Committee and should be allowed to continue on as chair of the committee. Well, if something's working right, why do you really need a committee? Like, committees kind of muddy up the waters. It seems to me that Taylor's work is gaining traction in the community, and he has the results to show for it. He's got a very loyal crew. He's got crew members and the crew winning awards nationwide, and Kruger's suggestion that he continue on seemed reasonable to me. Ultimately, the MXB president, Margie Sire, proctored a vote on Tristan Kruger's motion. 5 board members audibly voted in favor of Kruger's motion to accept Sire's recommendation for committee chairs. These included Tristan Kruger, Jeff Sella, Alex Sella, Ellen Throop, and Margie Sire, the president. One board member, Marty Schechter, opposed Kruger's motion to accept Sire's recommendation for committee chair. Ironically, Steve Larson, who proposed committee chair positions be reserved for elected board members on first right of refusal, abstained from Kruger's motion to accept Sire's recommendations for committee chairs. Nancy Glasgow did not audibly register a vote, but I believe she was counted as being in favor of the motion to accept Margie Sire's recommendations for committee chair positions. Michael Mayer did not vote as he was not in attendance on the teleconference at the time of the vote. Well, what's going on here? Well, Mary Bird, who chairs the social committee, is currently not a board member. However, neither the social committee nor Mary Bird came up in the discussion. It was clear to anybody in the room that Glasgow, Schechter, and Larson wanted to remove David Taylor as chair of the Beach Patrol Committee, and ultimately were unsuccessful. However, it was only revealed in a prior executive session as to the reason why, and it was alleged that Marty Schechter wants the chair position of the Beach Patrol Committee. And who's to blame him? I mean, this is a very high-profile committee. David Taylor, as I said, has built a great crew. They competed on the national stage. They've won awards. He's been giving out accolades to his crew during community meetings. We've seen it. We've seen that in September. We've seen that in May. And who wouldn't want that job? The issue is can Marty Schechter do that, pull off that job? And I would have some concerns there. David Taylor is apolitical. He could be running as the nicest guy in the country. He could be running for the nicest guy in the country award, and he would be up there. He's got he's tuned in. He's hip. He seems to connect with these kids. Marty Schechter, on the other hand, he comes across as somewhat aloof and somewhat unsympathetic and at times uncaring. And he's not as young as David Taylor is. I don't want to bring up age as an issue, but you have to connect with young adults in this type of position. And I just don't see Marty Schechter pulling that off and doing the type of job that David Taylor has done. Marty Schechter, I would trust him for community patrol. I think you have to have a personality like Marty's to do an effective job at community patrol, but not beach patrol. Next, the board considered whether or not to give 2 former board members a $100 gift card in recognition of their respective service. The outgoing board members this year are Judy Bennett and Sharon Adams. Jeff Sella proposed that the board not conflate the decision as one decision and proposed to vote on the appropriateness of awarding the 2 outgoing members separately. A number of board members questioned whether the practice of providing a $100 gift card was appropriate and whether the practice should be continued given the legal situation that materialized between the board and one of its now former board members. Steve Larson recognized that the fallout from having a board member sue the other board members has had an effect towards deciding not to award outgoing board member Judy Bennett a $100 gift card. Bennett is not suing the other board members and never has. DMF Associates, operating as Bennett Realty, is vigorously suing the Middlesex Beach Association to compel the association to approve a commercial sign. In any event, Larson said that any member, including a board member, has a right to relief from a perceived injustice and that any animosity should be weighed in accordance with due process. Ultimately, the board voted to approve a $100 gift card to both Judy Bennett and Sharon Adams. I personally thought this agenda item spurred perhaps the most silly exchange of that day. I question, why would you not award a $100 gift certificate to a member that has served the community for over 6 years on a voluntary basis, regardless of the lawsuit that is underway? You know, this is a lawsuit that the association forced by rejecting the initial application to erect a digital sign for less than compelling reasons. That pretty much concluded new business, and then Margie Sire went on to old business. There was nothing particularly eventful in old business, so Margie then turned to the community for feedback and for questions and comments. Margie Sire recognized as some of the members that were in attendance. She recognized Joe Rakowskis at the meeting. Rakowskis escalated a number of complaints to the board, including 1, a matter involving a trash rebate, 2, a matter involving a fruit stand, where the board had on 10 occasions reportedly threatened to impose a fine against Rakowskis, actually impose a fine against Rakowskis, only to later retract the threats and the fine, and 3, not being allowed to participate on the legal committee. Rakowskis reported that on September 28, 2018, he wrote a letter to Ellen Throop, who chairs the legal committee, asking to be on that committee. Rakowskis reported that in her reply, Throop said she would not allow him to participate on the committee, citing a personality clash with Rakowskis. Rakowskis further alleged that he has not received a reply from the board to a number of his email messages dating back several years. At one point, Rakowskis dramatically said that it was illegal for the board to preclude him from participating on the legal committee. Rakowskis also said that the board, through its behavior in general, has effectively violated the laws of Sussex County on a number of occasions. Rakowskis also questioned the board on the appropriateness of allowing dogs on the beach from a date in May through a date in September. The board had voted to allow dogs on the beach in 2020 on a trial basis, only retract the vote on an error in the minutes. Well, there's certainly a lot to unpack here, but I was struck by the fact that one member was noticeably silent during the entire course of Rakowskis' many complaints, and that was Ellen Throop, who was clearly an intended target of Rakowskis' complaints. Throop did not comment on the allegations at the meeting at all. I recall looking over at her several times, and she was statuesque. She consistently looked down at her notes. I don't believe she ever looked at Rakowskis or any other member of the board. Ultimately, Margie Sire promised to meet with her legal chair and respond to Rakowskis' numerous complaints. It struck me that a member has a right to attend a meeting within the confines of a homeowners association. However, an individual who chairs a committee also has a right to affiliate or not affiliate, as the case may be, with a member of the homeowner association. However, I believe if you get to the point of not affiliating, not allowing a member to participate in a committee meeting, there has to be due process, and there has to be a structured policy of when you're in a position to legally deny someone access to a committee meeting. So I don't know what President Sire and Ellen Throop are going to discuss. Hopefully they'll discuss if they don't have a policies and procedures document or a guideline of discluding members from committee meetings, they will probably want to put that on the agenda and get that into the minutes and get that realized, because it's certainly disquieting that any member can force themselves onto a committee meeting if they don't follow certain rules of etiquette. The board meeting on Saturday, September 21st, was the first chaired by Margie Sire as board president. It was immediately clear the tone of these meetings was to dramatically change. Sire did not recognize any members of the community to speak or comment on any issue until after all the agenda items were covered, discussed, and voted on. In fact, Sire repeatedly rebuffed individuals for making comments or asking questions during the meeting. It was painful. Every board decision was affected in the absence of any community input outside of the elected board members. In fact, Sire's agenda included discussion on how to organize meetings. She grappled with the decision of whether to recognize comments from the community prior to the agenda items or after. In her defense, Sire said that limiting discussion to board members would expedite the process and dramatically shorten the time it takes to conduct these meetings. Tristan Kruger said through teleconference he had 100% confidence in Margie Sire to run the meetings as she saw fit. Ironically, Steve Larson made the most effective argument as to why meetings should include the input of non-board members. Larson said that he felt it important to hear from everyone in the room, including non-board members, prior to registering his vote on a motion. If recognizing non-board members were reserved after all the agenda items were dispensed with, then the input from the community members would basically not matter. Steve always comes through in this regard. I've always found Steve to be very open to opinions. Even if he doesn't share those opinions, he's very open to listen to people's opinions, and perhaps some of these opinions have weighed on his decisions in voting for motions. In a shocking turn of events, over the course of her return to speak, MXB member Carol Tucker Foreman became so agitated with the members of the board that she reminded them that she had prior experience serving on HOA boards, and that her opinions matter even if many on the board do not think that they do. My take on this is the change in tone from the outgoing president, Jeff Sella, to the incoming president, Margie Sire, could not have been more stark. It was dramatic. Whereas board meetings presided by Sella encourage input from everyone, every member who cared to be in the room. Under this new management, the voice of the community outside of the elected representatives clearly didn't matter and was regarded as a waste of the board's time and energies. So that's your monthly update for September 2019. I'm your host, Greg Pichler, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.